of all, I'm Nadine Patterson. I'm the curator of Freedom, Fire, and Promiscuous Meetings, which is an exhibit. It's a companion piece at the Painted Bright Art Center for the play If She Stood by Aine Gordon. And we're part of the Philadelphia International Festival of the Arts. We have eight people working on this amazing exhibit. And then beyond that, we have films done by the Scribe Video Center Youth Documentary Project, and some of my films, and then some other local filmmakers. And we have short stories written by students at the William Penn Charter School. Africa has many ancient cultures in the continent, and I want people to have a sense of what was lost. What was lost? You know, there is the word mirror text of Theodore Harris, which links Nazism to the colonial slave trade.
People usually don't use the word fascism when they talk about the slave trade, you know, and that horror. So I wanted to see what would happen by putting these two things, associations, together. It's a quote from Malcolm X, and he was giving a speech, and he was talking about the situation of African Americans in this country. And in that speech, he talked about the transatlantic slave trade. He mentioned there was 100 million black people taken from Africa. And this is the German language translation of that quote. Yeah, I mean, the font is a beautiful font, but this is usually associated with a dark part of history, you know, because the font is a font that was used during Hitler's time.
One of the ideas of the show is transformation, and transformation through hardship and suffering, which is certainly what African Americans went through in terms of the Middle Passage and American chattel slavery. So what I wanted to investigate was, how are people able to survive such a trauma? And one of the keys to African American survival has been the retention of art and culture. And some people even believe in something called blood memory, that the ancestors speak to us, you know, through our DNA, and that there is knowledge that's passed down from generation to generation. So for example, Sarah Bond, she was a quilt maker for 15 years before she knew anything about the cultural legacy of her grandmother, great-grandmother, and great-great-grandmother as quilt makers. So I just think that's astounding.
When I was in college, I decided that I wanted to make a quilt, and I remember my mother saying to me, "Why are you doing that?" And I said, "You know, I don't really know, but I really feel like I need to do it." So I did. I just found a pattern in a book, and I made a quilt and quilted it over that summer. And then I found out later on at a family reunion that my great-great-grandmother, Jane Arthur Bond, is one of only a few known slave quilters. And I didn't really know that she had been, you know, a quilter. And I did know that my father's maternal grandmother had also been a quilter. And there's a lot of quilters in the Bond family. Well, there are two quilts in the show. One of them is a sampler quilt. And many, if not most of these blocks are contemporaneous with, you know, the 1800s and probably the time when this play is set. And the theory was that there was this quilt code for the Underground Railroad that was used to send hidden messages to fugitive slaves on their way. And of course, Pennsylvania, I mean, was very big in terms of abolitionism and in terms of the Underground Railroad. There have been a number of people who have, you know, discounted the validity of the code as an actual code that existed at that time. But still, the blocks, you know, are historically contemporaneous, and it's a nice way to talk about that part of the history of this part of Pennsylvania.
It's important to see African people collectively as human beings. And what this exhibit does very well is show the collective genius of people of African descent. And the people in this exhibit, they have heritage that links them to Europe, as well as to Native American or Indian culture. And this exhibit is a mix of all of those things. You know, Toni Nash's Medicine Woman piece is a mixture of the Indian and of the African together in terms of the healing power of womanhood and the mystical ancient knowledge that is buried deep within every woman. I think having that kind of understanding of the complexity of African American identity is very important.
My concept was that we wanted to talk about a sense of the female power, that the women were the medicine women and so on. They brought the knowledge and they brought the strength of how to help people. So that's where the power lays. I saw this mannequin and all it was a very contemporary wire. The whole figure was that, you know, sometimes you see them in the window and it's very soft. And I saw this thing and I went, wow. She started talking to me about, no, I want her to look, you know, some chains and some bottles and some things like that. And that's the way she just started flowing.
The reason why I thought it was important to show images of contemporary African culture is because we don't know what Africa is like at all. And we're so used to seeing images of starvation, of war, of poverty, of violence, that I wanted to give a sense of what Africa might have been like before the slave trade began. So you see that it is an organized society of human beings who live their life just like us on a daily basis, men, women, children. So often we focus on the negative imagery in African American culture. We focus on the prison industrial complex, we focus on the crumbling urban infrastructure, we focus on the decline of the effectiveness of public education. We have to look at our history in a different way and not see it always as a failure. And we have to see it as something that is a triumphant story. Not that everything is peachy keen, but there is struggle, but it is a triumphant struggle that we're still going through today.
It is his hand that we take to make that spiritual journey. Oh, sign.